and welcome everyone back to the Cipher Brief studio. I'm Suzanne Kelly here with Brad Christian and Alicia Volpe from the Cipher Brief. It's so nice to have you with us on this Wednesday, and thank you for joining us for part 4 in our special 6-part series on artificial intelligence in the new age of national security. Today, we're talking specifically about the impact of artificial intelligence on the U.S. intelligence community. First, a quick announcement and some logistics for you. You are all among the first to know about the Cipher Brief's first ever international, all virtual international summit next month. It runs May 11th through the 13th, and I'm being joined by my co-host, Nick Fishwick, who is a former senior member of the British Foreign Office. I think a lot of you out there know Nick and have either worked with him in the past or have heard of him in the past. It's going to be a fantastic series of conversations. We're looking forward to welcoming the former heads of Five Eyes intelligence agencies as we focus on geopolitical threats, alliances, and the future of technology in the national security and espionage missions. So this summit is free for Cipher Brief members. Registration details are in our morning newsletter. Today, I'd like to welcome a number of former senior national security leaders to this session. We have a lot of government organizations dialed in as well. I'd like to welcome everyone. We're looking forward to your questions during the session. We also have a number of journalists with us, and today's briefing is on the record. Please submit your questions for our speakers today using the link on the webinar page. If you're joining us via your computer, that's the sort of box on the right-hand side. That's how I identify everything these days. Click there, and there's a chat function as well. You can use that to submit your questions. If you're calling on your phone or you like to do it the old-fashioned way, please just send your questions via email to Brad. He's at bchristian@thecipherbrief.com. I'd like to thank Microsoft in particular for their support for this series, and I'd like to welcome Microsoft's lead data scientist, Amanda Mercer. Amanda leads a team of data scientists charged with using AI to solve the most challenging mission-sensitive problems at Microsoft. She's also an IC native. She spent more than 13 years as a data scientist for the government, working on a wide variety of missions, including weapons systems effectiveness, ballistics, counterterrorism, and counter-proliferation. Amanda, welcome. I'm so glad I caught you running from one client meeting to another, but look what technology allows us to do.
Yeah, we're really lucky that we can all participate here today. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. And thanks for the lovely intro.
Yeah, it's really good to have you with us. I really, one of the things we focus the most on at the Cipher Brief is public-private. We're going to hear from Sue Gordon in a couple of minutes, who I have learned so much from, but who really focuses on this idea that we can't do this mission alone, one or the other. So I'm really interested to get your thoughts for a few minutes on how you see the future of AI impacting the intelligence community.
Definitely, it's a complex environment, and I think most of the advancements that we've made in AI have really supported the argument for accuracy, right? We really want the most accurate algorithms possible. Now, the interesting thing is, as these algorithms have evolved to really focus on accuracy and hone that accuracy, we've started to lose some of the reliability that comes with it. So these algorithms are designed to answer two questions that are typically orthogonal to one another. Like I said, accuracy, how confident are you in this prediction? Those are two different questions. And so I've been seeing a lot of demand and need from our customer base to start to bake in more trust into the algorithms, especially as we move into more high impact scenarios. Even in the medical community, similarly, right, they're leveraging these for really high impact results. So not only are they interested, hey, do we think there's cancer in this spot on a scan of a lung? But now we have to also answer, how confident are we in that prediction, so that AI doesn't ever really replace humans, but it really gives us a sense of confidence and an understanding of where we can draw our line for risk tolerance. So that's something that I really see as being very impactful for the intelligence community. And this is state of the art, right? Like, we move in one direction, like I said, gaining more accuracy, and now we're realizing the impacts on our ability to rely on these and have trust. And so I think that's maybe the biggest focus for the next kind of push here.
And as we think about, we always talk about kind of like, human in the loop, which is the term that's most used, when you're talking about AI in the military, of course, but also when it comes to the intelligence community. How do you sort of see things evolving over the coming years from the position in which you sit, where you have, a pretty good idea of what's possible and what's in development and other things that may be in the pipeline? How do you see the future looking?
Yeah, I think, we're definitely going to see more human in the loop interaction, and that's going to allow us to continue to evolve the accuracy and hopefully the reliability of the algorithms as well. I
Mhm.
also see a greater focus on the security. So, we talk about adversarial AI and the ability for either other AI algorithms to attack AI and make it underperform or not perform at all, or even physical manifestations that could defeat AI. So we really have to also understand, any new threat vector can come into this new space of advancement in technology. So we're really investing a lot in adversarial AI and research there, as well as understanding AI misuse. And that's a more benign case, but honestly, that can be very misleading and really hamper our ability to advance in these communities, especially in the government, where we're seeing a lot of upskilling and a lot of training for the folks so that they can consume AI really well.
Mhm. And AI misuse, can you just define that for those of us who are a little bit newer to the conversation? What do you mean by AI misuse?
Sure, we're actually, the idea of it is kind of new, so we're still working through the definition. But I will give an example. If there was an algorithm trained to operate over land, and it was trained on data that was capturing details about land scenarios, and then you apply that to a maritime scenario, you will inevitably have issues there because it's never been exposed to that other biome. So that's a typical misuse case, and then you'll end up having really confident predictions about a wave looking like some other object that it is not.
I think that's a great example, super easy for all of us to kind of visualize. Well, I
Yeah.
really want to thank you as well for kind of being a part of this conversation. Any closing thoughts for us? And then I know you're going to stick around, which I appreciate, in case it's helpful to have you come back in.
Sure, I have one closing thought. So Sue brought up a wonderful question when we met the other day. She said, is there one question that every procurement officer should ask when they're looking at AI? And I think there are two, actually. She's really right. Everyone is really smart to think about this. You want to understand the differences between how the AI is implemented in the commercial space and
Mhm,
how it would be envisioned or implemented in the cleared space. And if
mhm,
anyone tells you it's exactly the same, that's how you know they don't understand the cleared space. So I do think that it's important that we acknowledge there are differences there, and certain things that we have to take into account. The other question I would recommend asking is, where does this not work? And again, this
mhm,
is another litmus test to make sure that who you're talking to really understands what they're bringing to the table, because anything that is really good will also have scenarios in which it does not work. And that's actually a sign of confidence that they're willing to tell you those times when it is not effective.
mhm. That's great, and another great way to build trust between the public and private sectors too, and telling them warts and all in terms of how they're using some of the technology. So, Amanda, thank you so much. I really appreciate this kind of snapshot into how you're thinking about these issues, and I have a feeling we might want to bring you back in. So, thank you. I know you're in between meetings, which is great, and we really appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'd like to welcome two women who are not only leaders in the intelligence community, but trailblazers as well. Dr. Stacy Dixon became the 8th Deputy Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency in 2019. In this role, she assists the director both in leading the agency and in managing the national system for geospatial intelligence. Before joining NGA, Dr. Dixon served as the director of the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects activity. I know you think that's easy to say, but it's not. That's why I like to call it IARPA. Dr. Dixon holds both a doctorate and master's degree in mechanical engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology and a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Stanford University. The Honorable Susan Gordon was sworn in as the 5th Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence in 2017. She assisted the DNI in leading the intelligence community and managing the ODNI. In particular, she focused on advancing intelligence integration across the IC, expanding outreach and partnerships, and driving innovation across the community. She's also a former deputy director of NGA. We have a theme going here. It's apparently where all the smart people go. And before that, she served for 27 years at the Central Intelligence Agency. She's now advising a number of organizations in the private sector, including Microsoft, for disclosure purposes here. Ladies, thank you both so much for being here today.
Great to be here. And you're right, all the cool kids go to NGA.
Right,
no argument there.
So we have a big task for the next hour, and that is identifying where the intelligence community is today when it comes to artificial intelligence, and then laying out kind of a vision for how you see AI impacting the IC's future. And I thought, Dr. Dixon, I might just start with you on this one to get a sense of kind of, your perch at NGA currently, where you think we are and where you think we need to be headed. And then Sue, I'll come to you with the exact same question.
As long as you call me Stacy for the rest of the time.
Okay, Stacy.
Awesome, thank you. So you can imagine that all of the agencies now are really thinking about how to apply artificial intelligence, machine learning to their mission. We are all surrounded by increasing amounts of data that we need to be able to process to really be able to provide our customers, our partners with the intelligence that's needed. From a geo in particular perspective, and Amanda did a great job starting us off and throwing out some terminology and some goals that I think we can all kind of agree that we're all working towards. The idea of accuracy and precision are hugely important for a geospatial organization. It's got to be timely. It also has to be trusted. And I think those are the other two bookends that the rest of the community is also focused on. We know that we need to be quicker about getting information to our partners or to our customers so that they can have the decision space to be able to interact, especially in this world we're in now with the strategic competition. If you looked at the annual threat assessment and the information that was presented in there, it highlighted both China and Russia's capabilities in artificial intelligence and the investments that they're making, and specifically the extreme investments that China's making. To be able to not only keep up with our mission to be better than those strategic competitors, we know we're going to need technology to help us. We have brilliant people in the intelligence community, but we don't have the time and space to be able to think through everything. So anything that we can do that gives us an edge, whether it is narrowing down the number of images that need to be considered, or pointing us to trends that we may have missed otherwise because they're happening in a place that we weren't necessarily looking. All of these things are areas where artificial intelligence and machine learning in particular can help us be better at doing our jobs. So we're all kind of bought in within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in the Augmenting Intelligence Using Machines, AIM, certainly trying to do this from a community perspective. We're all having to have conversations about our infrastructure. How do you create the data landscape, the data enterprise where you can actually treat your intelligence, your own particular int, as data so that we can also be interoperable. And so we're starting to have those conversations as well. There's a lot of room for application of this technology. I think we're all beginning to have really great successes within our own mission space, but there is a lot more success, I guess I would say a lot more success ahead, assuming that we forward focus on it, continue to train our workforce, and really continue to look for those places where AI can really contribute and return that investment into something that's going to benefit country, our mission, the nation.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great place to turn to Sue, because you, in your work at ODNI and kind of leading the intelligence community, really focused on sort of driving innovation. AI was on, on your plate every day. It seems like a huge mission. I mean, if I'm just looking at what a headache cyber has been to try to coordinate cyber across the US government, I'm wondering what AI looks like to you in terms of coordinating it so that, what Stacy, I almost called you Dr. Dixon again, what Stacy just laid out is going to be reachable in the near future, given how quickly the adversaries are using AI to their advantage as well.
Yeah, this is such a rich topic area, and I thought, Stacy, you did a great job kind of describing not only where we are, but where we can go. Let's see if I can take a slightly different additive tack. The reason why the ODNI is trying to have an initiative is because the community leaders know that aside from security clearance reform, being successful at the use of all the data sciences is an existential issue if you're an intelligence organization. No longer the hunters for data, we have to be the gatherers. We're trying to create wisdom out of data, intelligence, foresight, and I just don't think that there's any future if we aren't the world-class practitioners of all the information technologies. And I say practitioners because we aren't going to be the world-class developers, right? And you wouldn't want us to be, because we'd be too narrow, and this explosive competitive environment is really wonderful, but we do have to be practitioners. And we do have to do it at scale. And so really the issue for the OD&I was, how can we create the foundation and the conditions so that these data technologies and artificial intelligence and machine learning can be applied at scale to transform our overall capability, not just narrow single domain areas. So the great news is, I think the information environment gets better and better. We're smarter and smarter about how data want to be used. There are lots of good examples where single domain artificial intelligence is making real headway, from computer vision in Stacy's area to human language translation, and you're seeing some natural language processing applied to open source information to kind of do everything from disinformation to tipping and queuing. So you're seeing a lot of good stuff there. I think there are some things we still need to look at a little bit to drive. One, we need to look at the integration. How do all those single domains come together? Two, we're still doing a little bit of counting of knowns. And remember that intelligence is inductive, right? You want to see what is, and then you want to move up the chain to understand what it is. That is ingestion of lots of data, identification of lots of patterns, and you can imagine how that will be really interesting in the future for that. I thought Amanda did a great job, and Stacy did as well. AI assurance is going to be an area where the intelligence and national security communities should be the drivers of both the foundational research and the application of assurance technologies. Not that everyone doesn't need it, but we disproportionately need it, and so we should be the drivers. And then the last thing I'll say is we got to work on our humans so that they're thinking not just the efficiency play, but the potential it has to ask questions that can be broader. And I lied, one last thing. And that is, when you think about some of the new national security challenges that we're talking about, as the intelligence community figures out how it wants to play in climate and pandemics, you can imagine that those are large data problems. And some of the combinations of our sensors and AI could be a really interesting contributor to national security on those fronts, if we could figure out how to put it together.
Stacy, would you agree with that? I mean, that's primarily, NGA's mission is to kind of map the world, be able to take that information and share it in as much of an open source environment as possible, and to do it quicker. Is that kind of how?
There's definitely there's a portion of the mission that is very much open source, and the portion of the mission is using open source. That's not necessarily sharing it as broadly, but sharing it within the community. Yes. So I would agree with that. And doing all of that more quickly is definitely the goal. I wanted to just touch on one thing. When Sue said that we focused on, sort of the knowns, and we spent a lot of time doing that, it's probably not terribly surprising, because, with AI needing to have training data, your training data is going to come from what you have and what you know. But being able to then take it to look for those things that you don't know, or to look for things that are similar to, but somewhat different than, that you've already have in your collection. And I love seeing the processes mature to enable us to find things that we did in places that we did not know they were, and then later on to find things, hopefully, that we didn't even realize we needed to be looking for. Like, that's really the place that I think we want to end up as quickly as possible.
Let's focus on that for a couple of minutes. This idea that Sue mentioned, we have to work on our humans. I mean, what do you eventually see this looking like? I mean, how much trust are you putting at this point, based on what you've seen about how AI is developing and the gaps that currently exist? How much do you think a future intelligence community is going to be relying on more intelligence? And should analysts, I mean, it's silly to say, should they be worried about their jobs? Of course, they shouldn't be. However, their jobs will be changing. So how do you see that shift taking place, I guess? And then how would you even think about starting to change the culture so that people are getting used to this concept now and working with information in different ways so that they'll be prepared when the development of all the things we're talking about we need catches up?
I think the beautiful thing is that it is happening now and you're seeing it. You're seeing individuals come in having been exposed to some of the new capabilities in university, for example, and then bringing that in and wanting to figure out how to apply that. You see individuals who have a really hard problem who have this network where they're like, well, they have a data scientist in their network. And so in talking about the challenge, the data scientist provides a recommendation or a solution or a different way of approaching it, and then they see these amazing results. And then that gets them noticed by the sort of the output, the amount of information or the new intelligence they're sharing. We on the leadership side are also being able to highlight these for the entire workforce. We love bringing new vignettes of really innovative capabilities that have been applied to our mission to a broader audience, so that those who aren't yet thinking about how to apply it see how it is affecting someone else's mission and then want to then lean in and see if it can help theirs. So some of that is sort of the grassroots, kind of like each one teach one and then bring one along. I'm not expecting our analysts to become developers, coders, programmers, anything like that. I do need them to be comfortable enough understanding how this can impact their data, and we're starting to add in more basic training on data science 101. How do you start thinking about our data, our images as data in a way that we can actually put it forward? So we're offering education opportunities at every level to get everyone comfortable with sort of this new future, so that we can all ask the question, is there a way to do this faster? Is there a way to do this more automated? How can machines help the mission? I think those are the questions that we want everyone to be asking, and exposure is going to help them see the potential, and then hopefully we'll be able to resource and kind of get the any bureaucracy or any blockages out of the way so that they can apply it and take the risk. We want to encourage them to be able to take the risk on the mission, even if it takes them away from spending the time doing it the way they would have. That extra time they spend to this new method will likely deliver an outcome that they could not have otherwise achieved. And we want to be able to encourage that.
I think that's what it's going to take, that kind of mindset to get to real change, if I'm not mistaken. So the National Commission on Artificial Intelligence just submitted their recommendations to Congress, I think last month. I kind of just, big picture for us here. There were some fantastic things in that report, but Sue, let me ask you this one. When there's a commission that's put together like this, leaders within the IC obviously pay attention to the recommendations, but I mean, there's so much going on. We just heard all of it in the Worldwide Threats hearing, I mean, the open source part last week. Do you think the IC is prioritizing this in the right way, or is that another hurdle that we need to address, which is understanding what to prioritize first when you're given, a myriad of issues and areas where we need to keep up?
Yeah, so one, I think what Stacy described is a really both true, definitionally, and hopeful place. We've been investing in getting here for almost the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
It was eyesight to get connectivity, and then it was chief data officers to do it. And so what you're starting to see now, that the barriers to our human using it and the barriers to the introduction of technologies that will do it are coming down. So I think you almost are coming into the halcyon days from a use perspective. That doesn't solve all the problems, but I think it's good. When you have the AI Commission, one of the things I thought it was a great report.
Yep.
In part because it was specific. It didn't have 732 things. It had a relatively small set. Here's the way I hope the intelligence community would use it. One is to kind of check their own programs to see whether we're aligned in the same area. Number two is use it with your overseers to make sure that when you have a program that is consistent or a gap that needs to be filled, you now have a very venerable piece of work that you can say, we want to get here, here's what we need to do. I think the thing that probably still needs to happen, and Stacy, you know, if you've been gone a minute, you're old. I've been gone 2 years now, so I won't have the best view. But I think my sense of what still needs to be done is we're still doing things. And the real issue is to take those few pages of the worldwide threat assessment and say, if that's what the threat we need to counter, what is it we need to develop or be able to do to counter that threat? And then invest according to that outcome rather than just investing in things, expecting them to add up. I'll give you my best analogy, and it isn't the moon, and it's me as a zoologist. It's like if we put in a petri dish a bunch of hydrogen and oxygen and carbon molecules and amino acids, and then we just sat at it and stared at it and expected life to issue forth. I think there's a little bit that we're doing now is we're building a lot of things and adding a lot of things, expecting that those things alone will become the answers that we need. I think now we've got enough piece parts in the intelligence community. Do a little top down and say, to what do we need to apply them? And then use some of the cool ideas in the commission to see if it can't transport you. But Stacy will have a better answer on this one than me.
I was going to say, Stacey, it doesn't sound like she's very out of touch to me, but.
No, and it's funny. I feel like Sue's been in our meetings anyway, because the idea of focusing on first gaps and then the outcomes that you're trying to achieve is a conversation that we're having every place. It's not about counting things and having metrics that are just, you use the metric because it's easy to count these things. You really want to know, what are you trying to solve and how close are you getting to that? So having the outcome is huge. Being able to further have community plans. You know, we talk roadmaps sometimes, and I think those are still things, and some of them are delivered and some of them are still in work. I'm looking forward, and I'm really excited about the roadmaps that incorporate the advances in, you know, both you mentioned the natural language processing. So some of the signals related things, and then the GeoInt things. I'm still waiting for that conversation about how the two exactly come together in an algorithm, because that just seems to be where the power is going to be. I'm like, all right, I know what our limitations are from just using GeoInt. I think I know what limitations are from just using, for example, SIGINT. If you use what you know about the two of them and how they interrelate, is that's additional data right there that can actually be very powerful. So having some overarching guideposts, roadmap where we're all working together. So rather than delivering as things, as Sue said, you may be delivering things, but it's things along a path to a certain place. And everyone has a role to play. No duplication. I don't think there's duplication now, but I don't know that we're all as aligned as we could be. But I know that there are, those are where the conversations are headed. What is the outcome? What can everyone do to contribute to it, to include industry and academia? And that's sort of the other side of the part that I love when a commission comes forward, because you've got all these representatives. It's not just what they can tell the government to do. It's what happens afterwards with us working together. Because again, our adversaries, our competitors are working together. All elements of their society are working together towards artificial intelligence. If we have had these artificial barriers between our different organizations in industry, academia, and government, then we're going to have that much harder a time competing.
Yeah, I think I love that. And Sue, I'm gonna let you jump in there. I was just gonna say, I think just looking at the way that commission was put together, the people who sat on it, led by Eric Schmidt and Bob Work, I think, you know, you can't get to better people than that on that issue. Sue, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I was going to say, you also now have in this White House, I think they've really made it an investment on the technology policy side that was missing for a bit. That it happens to be our Jason Matheny that's sitting in the nexus of that, and Neuberger is there on the cyber side. I think in addition to that piece of work and what the community is doing, there is in this administration a focus on the policy pull side of it that I think will be really exciting. The other thing I was going to say, that wasn't what I was going to say, but Stacy prompted me to, is I also think there's exciting work going on, and we talk a lot about the analysis uses, but man, just on the collection side and the data side, and what the integration of these technologies into our collectors and our sensors that will allow us to reduce the amount of data that we actually have to send back, because you'll do some chaffing, dechaffing, and you'll have smaller pipes so they can go faster and further and we'll get to the edge. So I think there are really exciting things on that front in the AI ML integration with collectors and sensors that will have profound effect in terms of speed and reach.
To include multi-int collectors and the strategies against different mission areas. It is really exciting what ideas are coming together and then what we're actually able to achieve. To Sue's point, we have the same amount of resources, but because we're being smarter about what we're collecting, we're actually getting more of the information that we need. But there's still room for improvement on that, but we're definitely headed in the right direction with these automated strategies.
Refining, I like that. And we were pleased to kick off this series with Dr. Jason Matheny and you, Sue, back in January before he took this new position and now has, I think, like 3 different titles. So I still haven't figured out how he's going to do 3 different jobs, but I'm watching closely.
But if we're going to bet on someone, bet on Jason.
Yeah, and a great human to boot. All right, I got to get to some of these questions because they're rolling in and I've been having way too much fun and I can't be this selfish anymore. So first question, in super forecasting, we talk a lot about base rate or base case as a starting place for analysis. It seems that AI could tease out more variables and wider picture to sharpen our base rate understanding. He says hybrid forecasting challenge was fun. Thanks, IARPA. I'm assuming, Stacy, that's one of the programs that's IARPA ran.
That is correct.
So what your response to that on the super forecasting side?
So repeat part of the question again. I got so stuck on the super forecasting and the IARPA, I missed the question.
I know, it was exciting there for a minute. In super forecasting, we talk a lot about base rate or base case as a starting place for analysis, but it seems that AI could tease out more variables and a wider picture to sharpen that base rate understanding. Agree or disagree?
No, I would agree. I think certainly the easiest thing is to sort of get out the sort of what is sort of the norm. What do we what are the things that we kind of expect to be there? I think the question is, how do you get it to start looking for those anomalies, those things that are really where the intelligence value is, but it's not where you would be looking. There is the potential there. I think we're not there yet with applying the algorithms to just like go find something that I don't know is there, right? Like how do you even phrase the question? But I believe that by incorporating more data, by having more data at our disposal and letting the machine not really worry about the, what am I seeing? Let me interpret it that way. It's just looking at literally the zeros and ones and figuring out where the trends are, figuring out where things are just looking differently, look different than what it's used to seeing. The power is there for that. We are moving in that direction, but because it's not the typical, you train it to go find something and then it finds something, it's sort of the more advanced version or sort of the next step of what we're trying to do. But I think all the things we're doing building up to that are going to help us be better at that part of it.
Jeffrey Harris has a question. He wants to know if speed and precision and accuracy can be traded. Can humans contribute to false alarms caused by algorithm errors? Jeffrey, I'm not sure that I really asked that question in a very articulate way, but can speed and precision and accuracy be traded? I think is what he's really getting at. Sue, what do you think about that? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Man, I haven't done that in a long time. It depends on the task, right? So absolutely, there are some that require high precision and are not as time dominant, and so you can, and accuracy different from precision. Probably it depends on the task holds. Accuracy for intelligence, depending on the use, is almost sacrosanct, right? Precision can be, I don't know, precision for a different task, repeatability, how accurate. Yeah, I don't know, maybe. Now, I don't quite understand how you put the human in there, because I think machines could do all those things for you. I'm a big fan of time, but I do think that where humans are still brilliant anomaly detectors, and so for tasks that have time available, I think humans in that loop add value, particularly if you do the sequential AI. You see other things like ballistic missile defense where you just can't have a human in the loop because the things are happening so fast and you're going to expect the machines to do it as well. It's a really interesting question, Jeff, damn you. And tonight I'll think of a better answer.
So I would say there are places where you do need all three,
Yep.
and but those are sort of the driving cases, but they're ones that we have to be prepared to satisfy. And others, like Sue said, you don't need all three all the time, unless you're sort of in the geospatial world where you're trying. But to be realistic, there are things that you would allow to take longer if you could be more precise, if you don't have that time crunch.
Yeah. Let me get a few more of these questions in here. What impact will quantum computing have on AI in the intelligence sector? Everybody wants to know the answer to this. Will it solve those sort of garbage in, garbage out dilemma? And Jim Cox says, will it eliminate inherent bias in data input?
Oh, I don't know. I'll take the first one. I don't know that it eliminates inherent bias. I do think that it could have a gigo benefit in the sense that you just, more computational power, agility, speed, all those sorts of things. So I think you can do some of the garbage aspects. I don't know about the other. I don't know that it helps that as much as the other. What do you think?
I was tracking the same way. I don't think it's another kind of computer, right? So if you're going to build in a bias, you're going to build in a bias. The only thing I was thinking that maybe because it is so much faster, you could build in some extra checks that would then end up being taking the same amount of time as a regular computer. But I don't know that it ought, inherently would.
Yeah, but algorithms are still just opinions written in code. Right, and opinions have bias. I mean, they're just interesting things. I worry about over-reliance on training sets because the training set introduces bias and you get something that you didn't train for and you do it. And so there are all these issues that are not the adversarial part of assurance, but are really the great research part of assurance that I think will make the difference between efficient use and transformative use. So I think we're at the point already where you can use artificial intelligence in some of our processes, and what is commercially available is beneficial. But transformative use, I think, will require us to have a little bit more work on all aspects of assurance. And if Amanda were still here,
I was going to say, I think this is a good time to bring her back in real quick.
If Amanda were still here, she might give us a little fidelity on all the types of assurance that we talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So Amanda, before we lose you, you can speak to what Sue just said, or I was also going to ask you, this is a rare opportunity where you can have like really kind of conversations about, how the private sector is thinking versus how the government's thinking. So I was going to ask you if, there was one thing that you could really convey, and you come from the IC, so you know both worlds, but one thing that you could convey back to sort of government partners when this technology is being developed, what would that one thing be? Would it be around the assurance issue? Would it be around the expectation issue? Would it be around, the trust, which you mentioned off the top?
I think there's two things. I think the more maturity we build on government applications of AI, you're going to see more cross-skilling in private sector, understanding the government space more, and cross-skilling, like you guys were talking about, upskilling the government workforce to be the best practitioners of it. So they don't have to do the coding, but they have to understand what's under the hood so that they're relying on it responsibly. So I do think cross-skilling is one thing. I do want to mention that I don't think there will ever be a lack of demand for cleared AI talent. So it might be that, we're leveraging commercial talent, and that's wonderful, but I do think that some development will have to happen behind that shroud.
And Stacy, in the reverse, if there was one thing that, a message that you could kind of convey to the private sector about, how the government is thinking about this approach and understanding the complexity of what it's going to take to implement this, within the IC. What would that message back to industry be?
So some of this is from my time at IARPA, and it just continues to hear. So the ability to go out and purchase something that I know has been independently tested, and also, as Amanda mentioned earlier, sort of the bounds of when it works, when it doesn't work, how it's been trained, how it hasn't been trained, and being very forthcoming about that as you are advertising your product, as you were selling that thing, so that the government knows exactly what it's getting. Will build the kind of trust that means, you may have a repeat customer. What you don't want to do is sell us something and you successfully sell it, but then it doesn't do what we need it to do. That just won't do, that doesn't serve the country well. So put in the rigor, the independent rigor. We're talking about having more sort of test areas where we can test out things as a collective within the government. That is going to be great. Don't be afraid to throw your solution in there and see what happens. You'll get feedback. It'll be sort of better for everyone, and then we'll be able to apply the things that actually work to the mission space that we have. We don't really have we can't afford to spend a lot of time using things that don't work for us. We really have to go with the best things that can that understand what their limitations are and then can move us forward in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's why these conversations are so important. Sue, we're going to lose Amanda in just a minute because she has to actually go do work with clients and that private sector thing. Any last questions real quick for her before we let her go? I think you're on mute again. Sorry.
Keep doing your work. Get out of here. We need you. We need the advances you're doing. I think there are a lot of things that you're doing at Microsoft, and not exclusively with Microsoft, a lot of companies for their missions that will have application to ours. So the application of these technologies to commercial practices will be incredibly beneficial, right? Because there's some aspects of the same use. So get out of here and go do your work.
Yeah, we're all going to benefit, I think, ultimately from this private sector, just across the slate innovation. Okay, a couple more questions. Amanda, thank you so much. It's been great to see you. We hope your meeting goes well. And let me get to one question from Larry Pfeiffer, because I feel like this is an important question when we talk about the future. We talked about the workforce and kind of the talent, but Larry says he's often asked by students at Mason Scar School, and of course he runs the Hayden Center over there, what they should prioritize in their studies to advantage them in a career in intelligence. He tells them they need to be conversant in what we're discussing today. Do you have more specific guidance? Because I mean, this is the future workforce that we're talking about, that a lot of this is going to come a lot more quickly to some of these younger folks if they start to think about it differently right now.
I want them to focus on those technical courses that actually can allow them to be the practitioners we need them to be. But I also want to make sure that they're taking those courses that are going to help them understand people and understand relationships, because it really is, if you want to get things done, you have to, yes, know your stuff, but you have to know that that's not enough. You really have to be able to get in there and have conversations with people and really advocate for your position. So do both. If you can fit it in, do both.
Yeah, that's a good message. They don't really teach you that in college. I'm sure they do at the
school. Larry, tell them to be readers. There is nothing to help you be a critical thinker. It makes you more curious. It makes you wonder about things, because at the end of the day, sometimes you'll get a tasking to build something. Mm-hmm. Other times you will have to think of a problem that needs to be solved and be pulling. So everyone has to, everyone needs to be technically conversant. Some people have to be technically brilliant, but everyone needs to be critical thinkers. And one of the great ways to do that is just be a reader, read everything.
I think this is really bad for me to do a shameless plug, but I'm going to do it anyway. We run an academic incubator program at the Cipher Brief where we work with universities and we give students free memberships to the Cipher Brief so that they can get involved. And Larry's program there is one of our members. So if anyone who's joining us knows of a university who might benefit from us, pulling them into this universe and sharing some of the information that we put out, we're more than happy to do that. And you can drop us an email at editor@thecipherbrief.com, or you can just read the daily newsletter. But it's a great opportunity to sort of highlight a lot of the young new talent and how they think about these things. So a question here from Michael Gates, and then I'm going to come to both of you for some closing thoughts, because I'm keeping an eye on the time, but I'm learning so much. I want to keep going. Michael says, are we leading or trailing our adversaries when it comes to the application of AI and ML on respective national defense efforts? I love this question because I hear different answers almost every time it's asked. And what areas are we leading, and what areas do we need to play some catch up? So we kind of just briefly mentioned off the top China and Russia and what was laid out during the Worldwide Threats hearing last week. I'm really interested in how each of you sees this. Stacy, do you want to go first?
I'll highlight where, let's see, I won't couch it necessarily in the leading following, you'll understand why I gave the example. So there's a lot of investments that China is making in sort of smart cities and putting these, in enabling the technology to be in a lot of places around the world. They are learning a lot and collecting a lot of data in doing this, which sort of gives someone an advantage, right? You have an advantage because you have a lot more of this information. You're able to test things out in a lot more different places. So there's things that they do and approaches that they take that are different than the way that we do them and approach them that can give them an advantage in some things. I think from sort of sheer talent, we still have very, very innovative people. There's still a lot of desire to send people to our universities for this kind of training. Having said that, there are also a lot of foreign students in our universities and less American students in our universities. So we're sort of exporting a lot of talent. With respect to sheer numbers of people, clearly we don't have the same size population so as a China, for example. So there are different places, again, where I think there's an advantage that they have, but I think in some of the applications that I've seen that I'm aware of, we're definitely leading in some places, but I don't want us to say leading and so we're just going to stop. We can't take for granted any lead we might have because it can very quickly go the other way. I know I didn't exactly answer the question, but
no, that's a really realistic answer and easy to understand. Sue, what do you think?
Well, Stacy is the one that I think is their greatest advantage right now. Is they've got pretty good opportunity to practice using data, data that they acquire on their own citizens, data they illegally acquire through some of their cyber efforts, and so practice with using it, the limitations of it, the integration of it. I think that is probably the biggest advantage they have without the constraints that we believe in terms of privacy and boundaries between things. So that's probably greatest advantage. I think you could probably be safe saying it's almost a pick 'em in terms of technical capability, where I think we still have an advantage. So their system has the advantage of focus, and that is if they know they want to apply it, they can do whole of country focus in a particular area. Where I think we still have tremendous advantage is the competitive environment that allows people to go unexpected places, to discover things that haven't been part of a 5-year plan. So I don't think we're behind, but technically it's probably a pick 'em. And so there's really good reason with the AI Commission, with the drive that we need in national security, to kind of up our focus, our investment, because talent will come where money and quest is. So let's put some money and quest in these areas.
I like that. All right. Well, I know that Stacey has something she needs to get to, and this has just been a fantastic conversation. So I want to come back to each of you for some closing thoughts. Really, what I'm interested in is, where do we go from here? Where does this conversation need to go next in order to kind of make sure that we're on track with all the things that we've already identified over the last hour that we need to do, and some of the challenges that we're facing in order to do them? So Stacey, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm going to pick up where Sue left off with that focus. We really do need to, as a government, as a larger country, figure out where we're headed and what we're trying to achieve, what we're willing to work together to accomplish, and what needs to remain sort of separated and isolated. There's enough challenges around for everyone, so it's not necessarily competing with each other. I think if we create that roadmap, if we really are very, very specific about where we're trying to head, people will figure out where they fit along the way, and then we can actually just do so much more working together. So I'll stop there.
That's great. I think that's a great way to kind of lay out what needs to happen. So what do you think?
Yeah, in 2021 and beyond, all the threats and opportunities go to and through data. Advantage is going to be in the domain. We need advantage in that domain, but it needs to be at scale, and it needs to be against the problems that we have. Stacy said it perfectly. This is not something anyone can do alone, but it is something we all need. And neatly enough, the assurance piece is foundational to free and open societies. It is something we absolutely can do together because we don't need to protect assurance. We need to actually proliferate assurance.
So we need to keep educating and keep talking about these issues and make sure that we're letting people know why they need to know as well, even outside the IC, I think, for the kind of support that you're talking about that you need here. All right, well, I'd really like to thank both of you for taking so much time, and it was great to have Amanda with us too, to kind of bring in that perspective. I can't thank you enough. We know how busy you are. So I think you've helped us move this conversation forward to our next session, which is going to happen in May. So you'll have to read our morning newsletter to get the details on that. And thank you for being a part of it, for helping all of us talk and think through these issues and stay focused on them, which you need to do. So thank you. The Honorable Susan Gordon, Dr. Stacy Dixon. Probably, I've been kind of nerding out the whole hour too, because it's an all-female panel, which I love to see. It doesn't always happen, but it just organically does in this case, and I think we're all benefited from their knowledge. So we're going to continue the technology and intelligence conversations, and we're going to widen that a little bit to talk about our allies. There were a couple of questions during today's session on our allies as in sync on AI as they need to be too. We'll be focusing on that during the Cipher Brief's first ever international summit in May. It's free for Cipher Brief members. So we have started kind of rolling out some of the announcements of the speakers. We rolled out one of the former heads of MI6 who's going to be joining us. I think we're going to have a couple additional people who have been big partners in the Five Eyes Alliance over the years. So those will be really good conversations to have. Please join us for that. You can sign up, go to the website or check the newsletter. And we are looking forward to seeing you for part 5 in the series on AI in May, and we'll be sending out details on that soon. So thank you so much for dialing in, for spending this time with us, and for sending in your questions. We'll see you next time.